One of the South's largest gardens has spent half a century in repose under a blanket of vines. Jennifer Bigham has awakened this sleeping beauty and returned it to its former glory. The story of the garden and the gardener, next on A Gardener's Diary.
I found a garden just south of Atlanta that to any gardener is the equivalent of buried treasure. It was brought to life in the early 1900s as a vision of one woman, Hetty Jane Dunaway. After half a century of neglect, it was given new life by another woman with a vision, Jennifer Bigham. While searching for land to build a home in the country, Jennifer and her husband Roger found and purchased 135 kudzu-covered acres in Newnan, Georgia. They had heard of the legendary Dunaway Gardens, but never imagined they would one day be living in the middle of them. With the support of her husband and sons, Jennifer has spent the last 3 years uncovering and restoring the many themed gardens one by one. It's hard for me to believe that we're just about an hour south of Atlanta, and we're standing in the middle of these wonderful geometric ponds. Now, these look like they've been here a long time. Are these part of the original garden?
This is part of the original garden. This is called the Arrowhead Pools. These were full of kudzu when I acquired the garden.
And for people that don't know kudzu, the bane of the South, that weed that takes over everything.
Yes. Yeah. Our two biggest culprits out here have been kudzu and wisteria. You could see a little bit of the Arrowhead Pools, but not a lot, and we got in here and cleaned these out. Hetty Jane Dunaway, the lady that created the garden, she had a totem pole that was right here, but we didn't want to repeat the totem pole, and so we put in the stack stone obelisk. But the reason we knew these were Arrowhead Pools, somebody happened to give us a brochure, and it described the garden as a dramatized garden, and it described each garden room, and this was described as the Arrowhead Pools. That's how we knew.
Well, just this project must have taken you days and days to just...
We've been working over 3 years. It's taken years and years, and sometimes it feels like 33 years rather than 3 years, but we've been working about 3 years on the gardens.
Well, what a very distinctive feature to have these Arrowhead Pools.
Yeah, it's a preamble to the garden. Yeah, it's a warm-up.
The Dunaway Gardens is an amazing place. We didn't really realize what it was until it was uncovered.
I had never seen Dunaway Gardens. I had heard about it for many, many years when I lived in Newnan, and I heard it was a garden that was just made by a famous actress, but what it looked like from the road was a bunch of kudzu with a swamp. But my husband had heard it was under contract, and he said, "You want to go see what that garden looks like?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to."
We stopped by just to see it. You could see under some of the wisteria and ivy some of the magnificence of the rock walls, and it was so snaky and so mosquito-y and so ticky, and I mean, it was just horrible to be in.
I feel like I'm in this hidden, wonderful garden with these, I could be in Hawaii, not Georgia. These waterfalls and these rock walls. This is just incredible.
It's beautiful, isn't it? This is a swimming pool.
It's a swimming pool.
It was blasted out of granite back in the 20s, and this was one of the last places we uncovered in the garden, and I just think it is the grand finale. I think it's awesome.
It is, the creme de la creme. What did it look like when you started?
There was trees growing in the pool. A lot of the rock work was covered with ivy and wisteria. A lot of the rock work had to be repaired, and we had to hand remove all this. Yeah, we used wheelbarrows and shovels.
So you had no idea that you had this grand swimming pool, as you call it?
No, we didn't know. You could see a little bit of the rock walls peeking out, but we just had no idea that it would be this grand.
You've got this wonderful veil, this light green foliage of ivy, this little Kennelworth ivy?
It is Kennelworth. I didn't know what it was, and the Garden Club of Georgia came out and they had a fit over it. They said, "Oh, it's Kennelworth." And what's nice about it, it's delicate, but it actually travels, and it has little white flowers on it. I love it. It's beautiful.
And what's amazing to me is that this was planted by the original owners of the garden.
Hetty
That would have
Jane
been in the
Dunaway
1920s.
Probably put this in the 20s.
So it survived being covered over and overgrown, and then when you uncovered all that, you get these wonderful surprises.
Yes.
As Jennifer Bigham showed me around the Newnan, Georgia gardens that she has been restoring for the past 3 years, she entertained me with stories about the rich history of the gardens.
Dunaway Gardens was created back in 1916. It was started in 1916 by Hetty Jane Dunaway, the famous actress on the Chautauqua circuit. She ended up marrying her booking agent, Wayne P. Sewell, and they decided that this would be their home. Hetty Jane wasn't pleased. She said she wanted something more than a cotton field, and so She decided to build a theatrical training center. She started in 1916, worked all through the 20s, and had her grand opening in 1934. Back in its heyday, all kinds of people came. It was a very well-received garden. Minnie Pearl came to visit, and she stayed here for 7 years. She was a theatrical director, and that's where she came up with her theme that she took to Nashville. Walt Disney and his brother Roy would come here, and they would eat in the Bluebonnet Tea Room. But with the advent of television, the garden began to decline in the late 40s and into the 50s, so the gardens have been neglected and abandoned for close to 50 years.
You've got these wonderful native plants like this anise, this Alyssium parviflorum.
Yes.
Now, did you plant these? Even though they're native, they're not necessarily going to be native to a site.
Well, this is actually planted by Hetty Jane Dunaway in her day. She planted this, and that's why it's got that grand form. It's just huge.
I think it's an elegant evergreen. It's informal, but it's very elegant. And this is a fairly shady site and near moisture, but this particular anise will also grow in full sun and survive. You've got to keep it watered.
Well, actually, the back side of that grows in sun and the front side's in shade. So it is a combination plant.
And I just have to do that thing.
Go ahead.
Oh, it has that
it
great
does smell wonderful.
That
I
anise
know.
smell.
I love that.
You don't want everyone to crush the leaves, but
it is nice to have that fragrance. That's what I like about it too.
And this pool, we're in the Japanese garden,
yes.
part of the Japanese garden.
And this is actually called Twin Pools. And
it looks as if you can just walk right across here.
Well, this is a floating stone, but actually it's on a stacked stone base, but it's a lot of fun just to walk across, and it's a good hiding place for the fish as well. But I love the way the water flows from different levels.
And the sound of it is
yes,
so
it's wonderful. It has a natural spring in this area, so the water runs continuously.
But this is something I've never seen.
Is that not incredible?
Did you know what this was?
No, I didn't know, but apparently it's just very unusual to see Japanese plum yew this old. It's about 80 years old.
Well, it's unusual to see one this big.
Yes.
It's Cephalotaxis Herringtonia.
Uh-huh.
And there's a prostrate form that you see a lot in gardens as a ground cover.
Yes, I've got that, yeah.
And so you've limbed it up to expose all these beautiful trunks.
We have. It was covered with wisteria and had a lot of smilax in it, and so we did groom it, and really were surprised how pretty it is.
Well, plum yew, Cephalotaxis, is a great plant for a landscape, for an evergreen ground cover. There's a fastigiate upright form, but this looks more like the prostrate form.
I know, yeah.
Although it's a tree.
It is, and it's beautiful even in the winter.
I wonder if they knew what they were planting when they planted it in
I think Hetty Jane
day.
Dunaway knew. I think Hetty Jane Dunaway and I are kindred spirits. Hetty Jane Dunaway was dramatic, and I was too. As a child, I was always very dramatic. I loved to dress up. I loved to pretend. I had an imaginary boyfriend for years. So I think Hetty Jane Dunaway and I had quite a dramatic kinship there. I love the garden, and I know she loved the garden, and so I think a lot of things have come together in my lifetime to make this garden happen for me.
While Jennifer was clearing away the vines to reveal the bones of Hetty Jane Dunaway's spectacular creation, she discovered a feature that was unique to this part of Middle Georgia: granite, and lots of it, running underneath the garden. Large areas of exposed granite became garden features and provided a resource for restoring the stonework in the rest of the garden. As an unexpected reward, Jennifer rediscovered many of the original plants of Dunaway Gardens and beautifully complemented them with her own additions. Did you ever imagine that this granite outcropping was here in your garden?
No, I never had a clue. This was totally covered up with a lot of dirt and debris. It looked like a lot of sludge. And we removed it with mainly shovels, wheelbarrows. You couldn't get any kind of equipment in here if you wanted to. So this was all a labor of real love to uncover this rock. And the whole garden's built on the rock.
Really, I get a view of lots of different areas of the garden right from this spot.
Well, this is called Little Stone Mountain, and really it is the center of the garden. That's what makes it so wonderful.
And the water down here, that's part of the property?
Yes, that's the creek, and we have restored the creek. It was hardly running. It was a quagmire. People had thrown kitchen trash and everything else in it, so that's been restored. We went ahead and
Where do you get the energy, Jennifer?
Well, I've been blessed with energy, but my energy's waning, yes.
There are so many pools and ponds in this garden.
There's 12 collection pools in the garden, but this is the octagon pool, and it's just beautiful.
And to look up and see water coming down, and then to
yes.
here and here, and
It just spills from one pool to the next, and that's what I like about it.
you've got this illustrious, that's the elephant ears, the variety illustrious
Yes.
here, with that black and green is so pretty. And look at that golden creeping Jenny.
I know, and it loves the water.
And that horsetail. Now, I would not plant horsetail,
I know,
Jennifer.
I've heard that so many times, and in fact, we're thinking about pulling it out and putting it in a pot.
I
so
think
it can
I
be
would do
controlled.
that soon, because
Yes.
it could be another kudzu.
Yes, and we don't need that.
And you also get an incredible view here of the amphitheater.
I know, I love this. You know, you get it's kind of a panoramic view of that whole area. You get to see the different tiers.
And this patio, you don't have many areas like this in the garden. This stone has almost a pink tinge to it.
It does. This is called the pink patio area, and this was totally underground when, and we uncovered it and actually even put in the moss in between these rocks.
And these chairs look like they date back to another era.
We'd seen a picture and it looked like Hetty Jane Dunaway had furniture like this, so we actually got some for this garden, and really it's a great place because we want to share the garden. We want people to sit and relax, and it really gives a good opportunity for that.
The water feature, that must have been another buried
This
treasure.
goldfish pond was underground, and we spent a whole day just digging it out, and it's a wonderful pond now, but we had to resurface it, and it's a home for our goldfish.
So for 3 years, you've been uncovering buried treasures
Yes,
here at
it's been an
Dunaway.
excavation and also a very exciting journey.
And that majestic white oak, that takes my breath away.
Oh, I know, I love that. It's 200-year-old white oak. It's called the wedding tree, and people in the old days would get married under that tree. I think it's the most beautiful tree in the whole garden. It's just wonderful.
That's the pièce de résistance.
Back in its heyday, Dunaway Gardens was originally a sun garden, but now it's become more of a shade garden, and Jennifer had to come up with a whole new planting scheme.
I'm really glad this rail is here because I feel as if I'm just hanging over this waterfall.
Well, they call this the Hanging Gardens. We are kind of hanging over a lot of the garden. And what's so neat about this area is there's 2 curved staircases around this dripping waterfall. This rail actually, at one time they thought about making Dunaway Gardens an amusement park.
Can't imagine.
No, me either. And anyway, this rail was left on the back of the property, and we actually bent it to be our handrails.
It's old railroad
Yes,
track.
it really is.
And these hostas are such a great color in a shady woodland. This is Sum and Substance.
It is Sum and Substance, and I love the lime green color.
And they'll get bigger.
Yeah, they get bigger, and a lot of people feel they can't use the big leaf, but this is a good example that, you know, I think it goes perfectly right here.
Your combination of ferns and hostas here is really rich, beautiful.
It's planted very tightly, but I like that look. I want it to feel full, and I want it just to let your eye just travel over the different textures and colors, and just a tight garden scene here.
This garden is so large, and even though this is a shade garden, a lot of people are overwhelmed by the scale, but if you had a smaller garden, you could do the same types of combinations and utilize the stonework. Of course, this is original stonework.
Yes. These are all planting pockets, and you could do it on a large scale or a small scale, but I like the compactness of this area. I like it to be just chock full of plants, and which it is.
And this is a fun plant here. This is peacock moss.
Yes,
it's often
it
called.
is.
It's really a Selaginella.
Selaginella. Mm-hmm.
But I like that turquoise. You don't get many plants that get that shade of turquoise.
And I like the way it spills over the rocks. I think that's just wonderful. I think Dunaway Gardens has taught me patience. It took me close to a year to uncover it, and then we started the restoration process. So it's taken me almost till the 3rd year to be able to do the part that I absolutely adore. Get in here and plant, change things around, plant things too close, and then move them.
This is such a steep grade, and to treat it as an amphitheater is such a clever solution. This has to be an original garden feature, to have these old concrete walls that create the steps or the seats.
There's seats, and you know, you can put cushions there or blankets or whatever.
And this is something that Hetty created back in the early 1900s.
She did. Hetty Jane Dunaway, you know, was a famous actress on the Chautauqua circuit. She wanted a theatrical training center, and that's what she created. They had Edwin Strawbridge, a famous New York choreographer. They would do the Hollywood Ballet out here, so it was just a wonderful place. They had camps, and they would teach people how to perform, and then they would have plays out here, so it was really active.
So this is the stage?
Yes, and I think it was probably the centerpiece of the garden during its heyday.
Well, to inherit these great bones for a gardener is really such an asset. It would be such a different place without all the stonework and without the amphitheater.
I think that's what makes the garden so pretty in the winter. You can actually see more of the stone and more of the bones of the garden, and it's pretty year-round. I've always gardened my whole life. I've never had a garden of this size. 25 acres is much grander than anything I've ever had. I was a good backyard gardener, but nothing on this scale. But I do have to say, you can learn an awful lot in 3 years. I'm much more knowledgeable now than I was, but I love the process of learning.
Look at these butterflies. They're performing for us on this Abelia. This is such a great plant for butterflies. Abelia Chinensis, one of the parents is the glossy Abelia that lots of old-fashioned gardens feature, and you've chosen to feature these, which they're so beautiful. You have a lot of vision to choose plants like this Abelia, and that is something you have in common with the founders and creators of this original garden. And so there's a legacy here.
What's nice about it is we keep getting gifts every day. The ferns are just popping out of the walls. I haven't put them in. The moss is growing, and I'm still just learning.
I think that's a good way to put it. You're getting gifts every day.
We do.
You've uncovered the treasure, and the gifts just keep on giving.
Yes, they do, and so we're excited about that. It's just each season we keep noticing more and more that's actually coming back on its own, and I think it's happy to be back.
One of my favorites of the many themed gardens that Jennifer Bigham has restored is the mysterious and peaceful Sunken Gardens. Years ago, when famous actress Hetty Jane Dunaway created this garden, she must have had in mind the need for a quiet place to take a break and relax.
Oh, that Burford holly has got to be...
It's 80 years old is what they said.
I knew it was going to be something like that. I usually see it in a sheared ball in the landscape, but as a tree, it's a much more effective dramatic statement.
I know. I think Hetty Jane Dunaway put that in as a small shrub, and now it has turned into a tree. And I love the way it's conjoined and the trunk of it is contorted. I just think it's a beautiful specimen tree now.
And that's a plant that's still popular in landscapes today. That's Ilex cornuta, the Burford. The good thing is you see all the fruit set. You don't need to have male and female the way you do with a lot of hollies.
Exactly.
It's self-pollinating.
Yeah. And the birds love that.
Those will get red, red, red.
Yes, it's going to be beautiful.
And this is a more contemporary plant.
We put that in, yes.
This is that Eupatorium Chocolate for the dark foliage. It's related to Joe Pyeweed.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
And it's a hardy perennial, and you get these pretty, the white flowers are really almost
I like
a bonus.
the dainty flowers, yeah. I just think that's beautiful on the plant.
Some of the books say it only gets 2 feet tall. So this plant did not read
It likes
that
its soil, no. And it'll get a little bit taller, I think.
And in the winter, you just let it go, die all the way back. And
it dies back, and then it just comes right back for us. Yeah.
And this is a plant back here you don't see much. This is ruscus. That must date back.
It does. Hetty Jane Dunaway put that in, and I wasn't able to identify it, and I'm glad that you are. But anyway, a couple people have said that that's what it is, but she planted it in her day.
Well, she really did have a lot of foresight. She was really an interesting person, not only to have all these great bones in the garden, but these interesting plant choices.
Yes, yes.
And this looks like the wishing well in the photograph.
Yes, it is. So it's kind of a famous wishing well. Well, yeah, don't fall in. It's historic. A lot of ballerinas would sit just like you are.
That.
Yeah, they pose just like that.
I always wanted to be a ballerina. Do you think if I make that wish here, I'll become a ballerina?
Yes, I think you need to throw in a coin and make a wish.
It's a little late for me to become a ballerina.
That's the nice thing. Dreams come true here. This is a garden where you can dream, and I think this is a place to let your dreams just flourish.
Jennifer has her own wishes. Now that she's reclaimed these gardens, her next project is to protect the property's wetlands, which are home to egrets and other wild creatures. She also hopes that her efforts will inspire others not to be afraid to dream.
A lot of times you get caught up in a momentum and you can't back out if you want to. But what I would like to tell other people is slow down, enjoy the process. The journey's fun. It doesn't have to all be done overnight. Enjoy the journey and then enjoy the results of your labor.